Hi Sargon, Max Wright here, and I just watched your video, "The False Narrative of the Working Poor," and well, just right off the bat, I wanted to say, to be fair, despite the fact I'm pretty much just polar opposite to you in most of your economic and political beliefs, I do agree with pretty much everything you said in that video. But I think there's a really interesting conversation just beneath the surface that I wanted to talk about. I think you'll find interesting. So in this video, is about an interaction you had with a YouTuber called Pagada. And Pagada posted a comment which was, I agree with you, very, very unempathetic towards the world's poor. And I, I think I, like you, have a pretty good opinion of humanity. And it seems that very often that people who are, let's say, on economically right, or advocates of economic freedom, they often slip into this position, or it sounds very harsh, and it sounds as though they don't care about the poor at all. Now, I don't know this Pagada from a bar of soap. He may not care. I don't know. But like I said, my opinion is generally pretty good of humanity, and I bet you he probably does. But the issue that I want to talk about is just, why does he come across so unempathetic, which I agree that he does. And I can sympathize with Pagada a little bit here, because I remember, back in the day, I used to fall into this trap often. You're in a discussion or whatever, and you're just like, at some point you just say, it just doesn't matter. I get that there are poor people, but it just doesn't matter. And it sounds very unempathetic and very, very cruel. And I get that. And so why do people fall into that trap all the time? When I know they don't feel it. I know I don't feel it. Am very empathetic to the poor. In fact, the reason I created a YouTube channel and spend time and energy learning this stuff and researching it and then making videos trying to share it is for the poor people. I know that leftist leaning philosophies and things, they actually create more poor and impoverish the poor further than they are already. And I know economic freedom is actually all the poor need to get out of that. And just by the way, side note, you have a fantastic persona and character, and you have a fantastic YouTube following, and it's awesome. You absolutely deserve it. And with that great power comes just great responsibility. I'm not sure. You've made lots of videos. I'm not sure if you've ever spent too much time interviewing or speaking to people who believe in economic freedom and why, but I would really encourage you to do that. You have that, like I said, you have that great that power and that therefore responsibility of this YouTube following, and it would just be horrible to for in 20, 30 years for you to realize that, oh man, what I've been campaigning for has actually hurt humanity, which is the exact opposite of what I know you intend to do. So I'd really encourage, I'd be happy to do it on a Google Hangout or something, or if I'm not your cup of tea, that's fine. Ask me and I might be able to introduce you to other people, or you can find them yourself. But I really would encourage you to do that, because we do care. And people who campaign for economic freedoms generally absolutely do care. And the reason they're doing what they're doing and advocate what they advocate is for the poor, not to be against them. So I'm not going to make that case, though, in this video. That'll be too long a video. But the issue I want to talk about is, why do so often we fall into this trap of appearing unempathetic? So why does this happen? I think there's a few different reasons. One of which I think is that we get told that we're selfish all the time. It obviously behooves the left to turn the debate into, if you're a good person, if you care about the poor, then you should advocate helping the poor out. If you're a selfish person, if you don't care about the poor, and you're only interested in yourself, you're not a good citizen of the world, then that's what they believe in, they're bad people. So to the degree that they can turn the debate into that, then that's to the degree they win. And so very, very often that's what the debate falls into. And so the number of times that we get told that we're selfish and that what we believe means that we're selfish is really, it's never ending. And so it does make sense that from time to time, as much as we would not like it to, that we do fall into that habit of maybe saying something that sounds very, very selfish. The second reason is that the real reason that most people advocate for economic freedom is that it's actually going to help humanity reduce the number of poor and increase the quality of life of the poor. In order to understand those reasons, though, there's a fair amount of economic understanding that needs to be there. And most people don't have that understanding, and even more people don't care to learn. So to have that position, usually you fall on deaf ears. You're talking to a very small percentage of the population who actually give a shit. By the way, the person advocating economic freedom also needs to understand all of those principles. And so it's a very small subset of conversations. It's where both parties understand and are interested in the economic principles about why socialism creates poor and hurts the poor, that where you get to stay in that zone. When you fall out of that zone, if either one of the two parties do not understand or care about economic principles, then how do you win the argument? The only way you can win the argument is to vilify and demonize the poor. And I think this is another huge pressure point where people fall into, and it's a bad trap. Like I said, I used to fall into it myself. It's a bad trap where you end up, the only way you can get through to people is if you can successfully vilify them. And it's not, I'm sure you'll agree that there's not instances where they deserve to be vilified. Of course, and with the 6 billion people in the world, I'm sure that we can think of examples, probably in our own lives, where someone is, lazy and being a welfare bludger. I'm sure it happens. And let's take Pagata, for example. I mean, I don't know him. I don't know his background, but he might be on minimum wage for all I know. And let's say he goes off to, the factory and works his minimum wage job, but, he wants to get ahead or whatever, and he puts his hand up for 20 hours of overtime every week. And because he does that, he breaks into some tax threshold, and now a huge portion of the extra wages he earned actually get taken off him and given to somebody who's in exactly the same job but chooses not to do the overtime. And money gets passed to him through the welfare system because he's below some income level. This kind of stuff happens all the time. And so that's a very real and visceral, where it actually does make, assuming Pagata is in this hypothetical situation, it actually does make it's like, this isn't fair. Like, it's not fair. They are just not making good decisions. They're not just working as hard as me, and it makes them very, very angry. And I can understand the perspective. I certainly agree with you that that's not the generalization of all poor, not by a long stretch. But I think we can agree that it absolutely does happen, and that's why sometimes they get that feeling. And then the third reason, I think this is the least understood, but I think it's actually the most powerful reason as to why sometimes people who are advocates of economic freedom fall into this habit of being very, very uncaring and very, very unempathetic towards the poor. And that is, no matter how empathetic and compassionate you become, it will still never, ever, ever justify socialism. It never, ever will. Let me kind of paint the picture this way. You did a great example of how a person living in your town would only have, I think, £22 per week, I think, as savings if there was, there was no emergencies, no medical bills, etc. And it's a very, very sad story and an all too true story. I completely agree with you. And this person, this hypothetical person, absolutely deserves our sympathy and our empathy and our compassion. Totally agree with it. No matter, and I'm sure there's plenty of places in the world where it's even much worse than that. Right? And they just literally cannot survive. There's not £22, it's negative something. Right? And I get that it's really, really bad, and I have absolute sympathy and empathy for it. But the argument seems to be, because there's this really, really bad situation that makes us all sad, and we should have compassion for them, totally agree with all of that, then therefore, welfare system. All right? Now that's what welfare system is taking money from some people and giving it to others. That's what it is. And that is, when anybody else does that, that is called theft. I'm sure you've heard this argument before. But it comes back to like that feeling of, in the previous point, where Pagata was doing an extra 20 hours in the factory at minimum wage, and someone comes and takes money out of his pocket, gives it to the colleague who didn't come and do the 20 hours of overtime. And it sucks, and it's rude, and it's offensive. Now, I've had this conversation many times, and that point I just said hardly ever sinks in with socialists. They don't agree it's welfare. They don't agree they don't agree that it's stealing, it's different, and all kinds of justifications. So what I've found does work is if I extrapolate the point, use the exact same argument for something else, where people don't have the biases of a leftist education system and a leftist media system. And so imagine this point. I could build for you a case that especially for men, and especially hormone-driven, late teens, 20-something men. Sex is unbelievably important. I think the stats are we think about it every 7 seconds. We're obsessed by it. It's the reason we climb mountains. It's the reason we get up in the morning. All of our discretionary spending is spent on getting ourselves drunk or the girls drunk or something like that, trying to get frickin' laid, right? That's tongue-in-cheek. I can make the case that sex is an absolutely huge part of life. So there's obviously some very, very sad instances out there where there are some guys who for whatever different reasons, maybe they're not the most attractive, maybe they grew up without a mentor, they have a lack of confidence and whatever, and they become the 40-year-old, 50-year-old virgin type guys, right? And they never, ever, ever get sex. Now, if I was a better storyteller and I could really drill in the pain points and really make you empathize with that situation, I could, if I was good at my job, I could probably have you pouring down tears of sympathy for this hypothetical poor guy, and I'm sure there's many of them out there. So what if I said, therefore, because of this bad situation, what we should do is socialize the vagina. What we should do is, maybe at least one card per year gets given to every guy so that he gets to have some sex, and he gets to give that card to a girl and she has to have sex with him. That's the law. Quite rightly, you would think I was completely mad, completely insane. And what I've just said is, let's legalize and systemize rape. All right, let's legalize, systemize. Not only that, let's do it in all of the community's name so that everybody is a participant in rape. All the male characters, at least, anyway. To me, it's the exact same argument. Because this tragic, sad story about the poor person, then let's legalize and systemize theft. Right? Let's take something that's not ours just because, what? Because the group said that humanity will work out better for it? Because there's a sad story, something like that. The principle is, no matter how bad and sad the sob story is of the poor 40-year-old virgin, it never, ever, ever was going to justify, no matter how much you empathize with that person, it's never going to justify doing something aggressing against another person. It's the violation of the most basic tenet of ethics we have in society, which is the non-aggression principle. Every person owns their physical body. They own their time. Slavery's not allowed anymore. And you own the product of your body and your time, which is the product of your work, your assets, your money, your etc. That is what is yours. That is what you have in this world. And when you take that and you threaten to throw somebody in jail if they don't pay their taxes, what you're doing is you're aggressing against that. And you're saying, because of sad story, which I can empathize with, therefore, let's commit an injustice and do a theft. Not only commit it, systemize it, legalize it, and do it en masse in humanity's name. So, as people on the economic right feel, no matter how much you empathize, no matter how sad that story is, when we know the next sentence coming is, therefore socialism, therefore welfare, goes, I know, we don't care. And we don't care, not because we don't care, we do care, but we don't care because no matter how bad this story gets, no matter how much empathy I have, it will never, ever, ever, ever be a justification for stealing someone's stuff and giving it to somebody else. I can't participate in that program. I can't advocate for it. In the same way that you would find it completely offensive, no matter how sad this story is about the 40-year-old virgin, you would never, ever, ever, ever advocate redistributing vagina around so that, sorry girls, you can't all fuck the jock. No, you've got to go and fuck the nerd sometimes too. That's how we got to do this to make humanity more fair. You know it's wrong. But for a whole bunch of reasons, which is too long for this video, we've been blinded to that. And economically, we just see it as the same thing. But they are the same principle. It's because of sad story, let's commit an injustice. And when we know that that's coming at the end of it, it doesn't matter how sad the story is. So we appear very, very dispassionate and very, very unempathetic about it. And that's my point. That's my video. Thank you very much. I think there's 3 reasons there that I think very few people talk about. And Pagata, just wanted to let you know, I don't mean to be criticizing you, dude, because I used to do that plenty when I was younger before I became aware of all of these things. And it's really, really hard to stay in that space where you are very, very empathetic, which you probably are, and still have this argument. So hope that's helpful. Hope that's interesting. I'll speak to you later.